I came across a postcard this morning that I think I got in 1972 when I was attending a church and youth group and Sunday school back in seventh grade. I had a Sunday school teacher and youth leader who ended up going away to seminary in Illinois. And he wrote me a postcard. I've kept it my whole life. And in that postcard, he encourages me while he's gone to continue inviting family members and friends to church. And he told me a little bit in this postcard about what it was like being in seminary in a sentence or two, because it's just a little postcard. But one of the things that stood out to me, and probably the reason I've kept the postcard all this time, is there's a little sentence in there about maybe one of you junior high kids will go to seminary someday. And I remember as a seventh grader, or maybe I was in eighth grade by then, thinking, I bet that's going to be me. I had no idea what that meant. I didn't really understand seminary, except that's where people go to learn more about God. And so in my little seventh or eighth grade brain, I just had that little sentence fixed in there. And when I graduated from college in 1982, I knew that I was going to go to seminary. In fact, within a month after I graduated from college with my bachelor's degree in philosophy, I started attending seminary. Now, there was an option back then to get an MA, or a Master of Arts in Theology, or a Master of Divinity. Now, I chose the Master of Arts because there was no way on earth I was ever going to be a pastor or a preacher. That was just not part of the plan. And so I started taking courses, and I really enjoyed seminary. It was a 2-year program, and I thought, well, I'm not in a hurry. I was working at a church in Santa Barbara, and then I moved to the LA area, not far from where the seminary campus was in Pasadena, and I just thought, yeah, I've got time. I'm not in a huge hurry, and I was really enjoying the youth ministry that I was doing in 2 different churches, first in Santa Barbara and then in the LA area. Well, all of a sudden, I was more than halfway through my master's degree, and I realized that there was one thing I couldn't put off any longer. I had to either take public speaking or homiletics, basically meaning preaching. So I looked at the syllabus for each, and I realized that if I took public speaking, I'd have to get up in front of people 6 times and speak homiletics just twice. So I obviously was going to choose homiletics. So some people have a fear of public speaking. And people are sometimes surprised that I used to. And it wasn't just a fear, it was literally a hatred. If I had to get up in front of a group of more than 12 people, I would just absolutely hate that. I wouldn't sleep the night before. I would shake, and I would just dread every moment of it. I thought, well, to get a master's degree, if I have to stand up in front of people twice, I guess that's not the end of the world. I'll get through it. And so I started asking people, what are some tips you can give me to make this a little easier? And one thing I'll never forget, somebody said, well, write on the paper here, just like you speak. So whatever you write here, don't try to impress anybody, just write it like you speak. And I thought, well, that's helpful. And then I think it was the same person said, only write on the top half of the paper. Never go below, because what you don't want to do when you're reading is to look way down here and then have to look up. So I practiced over and over and over, looking at the top half of the paper and looking up. And in the homiletics course, there were all these books and articles we had to read about preaching. And then the professor gave us lectures on preaching. And then we had to plan, according to all that we read and all that we heard, 2 sermons. And then we had to deliver those sermons in front of our small group. So the class was divided into groups of 8 and a professor or a TA. And we basically had to get up and in front of a movie camera. That's what we called them back then, rather than video cameras, because who knew that the internet was coming in videos and stuff like that? YouTube, whatever. So anyway, I practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. And I got up in front of everybody and I delivered my sermon. And one of the greatest surprises of my life happened. I actually enjoyed it. Blew me away, but I didn't think I was very good at it. So what we had to do after, I think 2 of us or 4 of us would preach our 20-minute sermon, then we would sit down in the room and watch on this screen, this was all brand new technology back then, would watch on a big screen us preaching. And then whoever the preacher was would have to respond, and then the professor would respond, and all the other students responded. I actually kind of liked what I saw. I was articulate. I didn't, you just kind of like go bumbling through the whole thing like I thought I would. And the professor said, you know what? You're really good. It blew me away. My colleagues, the other students said, you know what? You are really good. We think you have a gift. And I was like, seriously? But I'm not even going for the MDiv, the Master of Divinity. I'm not interested in preaching or being a preacher. Well, then I had to do my second sermon, and I practiced even more. Everything was written on the top half of the page, and I basically read everything word for word that I didn't have memorized. And you know, I think I got a little better, and I liked it. And the professor said, I think you might want to consider switching from a Master of Arts to a Master's of Divinity because you have a gift. I was blown away. And so I switched. And then I took advanced preaching, which if you had told me when I had started seminary that I would ever do that, I would have just laughed because this was just not anywhere in my comfort zone. It's not what I enjoyed. And I grew up in a church where sermons were typically very boring. And one thing that I knew that I was not going to do for the rest of my life as a career was to bore people out of their minds. That's what I thought preaching was, I think, when I went into it. And then the other thing I think that really bothered me about preaching was the churches of my childhood and early adulthood tended to be very judgmental. There were a lot of rules and a lot of finger pointing. And I remember when I was, even back in middle school, I liked to dance. And I took dance classes. I took ballroom and jazz, and I just loved dancing, and I loved watching hula. And I went to a church that believed that dancing was sinful. And that came out in some of the sermons. If you dance, that's just a bad thing. They also, at the first church I'm remembering, they believed that drinking alcohol was sinful. And I grew up in a family where my parents always had wine for dinner. My mom and dad both had a beer in the afternoon, and you know, it was just not a big deal. But I just felt a lot of judgment. If you were gay, if you supported people who were gay, that was a bad thing for some of these churches as well. And so I just grew up thinking preaching is all about making people feel bad. And I thought, well, I hate public speaking. The last thing I want to do as a career is bore people and make them feel bad. But as I went through my Master of Divinity and studied and looked at the Old Testament and learned a little bit of Hebrew and looked at the New Testament and learned a lot of Greek and did all these things that I never thought I was going to enjoy, I realized that so much of preaching was not about boring people, but pointing people to the mystery of God. And preaching wasn't, or worship wasn't about making people feel bad at all. It was about opening people up to the possibilities of God's love to them and through them. I got so excited that within a week after I finished seminary, my Master of Divinity, I was ordained, and I had a job at a church in Hawaii, in Honolulu. Now, as I look back, I think it was seminary that not only taught me many wonderful things about life and about church and about being Christian and being spiritual, but seminary actually helped me to find my calling and my gifts. When I started seminary, I thought, you know, I can do youth ministry, I can go on the mission field. There's all sorts of things I can do with it. And I remember even thinking when I started, even if I end up as a mailman like my dad, at least I'll have all this good stuff in here and in here. But while I was at seminary, both the other students and my professors, the faculty and the staff, helped me to see that I had gifts that I didn't even know I had before. It was so very good for me, and I learned more than I possibly could ever imagine. Some of the things I learned come right out of today's New Testament reading from the second chapter of Acts. For what I read to you earlier today, to me this was very formational, when it says they were all together in one place. Now, I can't tell you how many times where I've been on an airplane or at an airport or just met somebody at the grocery store, and the topic comes up, so what do you do? And when I tell them that I'm a pastor, if they don't go to church, typically their response is, well, I'm very spiritual, I'm just not religious. I just don't attend church. And I just learned in seminary that for me, there's something special about being together. Now, don't get me wrong. I feel God's presence when I go walking at the beach. I feel God's presence, and that's usually when I'm by myself. I feel God's presence when I'm alone watercoloring and reading and being creative. And sometimes just swimming in the ocean, I feel God's presence. But there's something about being together with other people that believe some of the things I do that really makes a difference for me. I think that you give me, as a congregation, things I can't find anywhere else. This idea that we can come together and be who we are and not have to feel bad at all or bore each other, this is what I need. I need you. So I learned in seminary that I need other people to support me in my faith journey. And again, that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong at all with being alone and having my meditation time or my prayer time, but I also need to be with other people. The other thing that I learned in seminary that is from this morning's second chapter of Acts is this idea that the Holy Spirit spoke through people in their own languages. And there were people from all over the world at that point. And what that said to me is nobody needs to change their language, their culture, or who they are to know God's love. Nobody needs to change to know that God is there present among them. Nobody needs to change who they are and what their upbringing is, and what they've been taught, or how they've learned to view the world in order to make a difference in the world. And finally, one of the things I learned in seminary that's right there in the second chapter of Acts is that the Holy Spirit was poured out among all flesh. Now, it doesn't say sprinkled a little bit on some people. It's poured out upon all flesh. And there are times where I may not feel that the Holy Spirit is poured out in my life or in my heart or around me. But that text reminds me that whether I feel it or not, the Holy Spirit, God's presence, is filling me and all around me at all times. And so all of those things have been very formative in my ministry and in my life. And I know that the things I learned in seminary, not only about God and spirituality, but about myself, allowed me to do things in my life that I never would have done otherwise. And I certainly wouldn't be here today standing in front of you if it wasn't for seminary. As I serve on the board of Pacific School of Religion, I know that this world needs seminaries more now than ever. Every once in a while, somebody will say to me, well, Kahu, You went to one seminary in California where you got your master's degree and your doctorate. Why are you at Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley when that's not where you went? And I'm glad you asked that question because I'm going to tell you exactly why I'm supportive of Pacific School of Religion. First and foremost, what stands out to me is the diversity. When I was sitting around the boardroom at the table where all the trustees were and the key staff people who serve on the trustees, I was blown away, and I am every single time I go, at the diversity. We have, as a president of the school, a Guatemalan Lutheran. Who knew there was such a thing? I actually have an aunt that used to live here in Kalmakani who was Lutheran, who ended up in Guatemala, and she never once talked about there being a single other Lutheran in all of Guatemala. They were mainly Catholic. But anyway, here we have as our leader, the president of the school is a Guatemalan Lutheran that is passionate about immigration issues. On one corner of the table typically sits our dean, this amazingly talented, brilliant woman from India, an Indian woman who has a background in many different denominations, including Catholicism. And the president of or the chairman of our board is an African-American United Church of Christ leader. There's a staff or a faculty person that serves on the board who is a gay theologian and an Episcopal priest. Now, I could go around the whole table and talk to you about all the different kinds of people and their backgrounds, but when I think about the seminary where I attended, I don't remember who the trustees were, but I do remember that they tended to be mostly white males that dressed in business suits. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I love the fact that at Pacific School of Religion, we practice diversity. We don't just say, we live in a diverse world, so let's support everyone. But we bring people together from all different parts of the world, all different languages, all different walks of life, sexual orientations, and religious backgrounds. And together, we believe in God, we believe in the life and teachings of Jesus, and we believe that we can teach our students how to make a difference in the world. It is so important to me to be a part of an organization where we have great diversity. Pacific School of Religion also engages the trustees with the students. I don't remember once actually ever meeting a trustee at my seminary. And I went there actually for 8 years to get my Master of Divinity degree. I told you I wasn't in a hurry. It took me 8 years to get a 3-year degree, but one of the reasons, or the primary reason, was because I didn't want to be in such debt when I finished that I couldn't afford working at a church. I never met a trustee that I was aware of. I saw them when they had board meetings, but I never met a single one, either during my master's degree or my doctoral work. At Pacific School of Religion, every time the board comes together, we have a town hall meeting and invite all the students and faculty and staff. And we have a meeting that's actually run by the students so that we can share with all the students what's going on, what are the important decisions that are going on that we're actually making in our meetings while we're there on campus. And we give the students the opportunity to ask us any questions that they want or share with us anything that they have that's a concern or just talk story with us to tell us what's going on. I didn't know that seminaries did that because I had never seen that before. I didn't see it at my college. I didn't see it during my master's degree or my doctoral work. It was like the trustees were just a bunch of people that made decisions that we rarely ever saw. And if you did, you never met them. But I'm a part of an organization where we care enough about our students to actually spend time with them. Every Tuesday on campus is chapel. And one of the reasons that we meet as the Board of Trustees every Monday and Tuesday is so that we have a chance to attend chapel that's run by the students. It's a worship service that's planned by the students and led by the students. And every single time I go to chapel, I'm blown away by the things that are said, by the worship services, by the preaching, by the compassion that our students have for the world. As I think about why I'm a part of Pacific School of Religion, after 2.5 years serving on the Board of Trustees, I can't imagine not being a part of Pacific School of Religion. It has been so good for me to know that I spend some of my time helping our institution, and it is an institution, it's an organization, train and educate leaders for the church and for the world. And as I think about all the changes that have happened since I started seminary in 1982, we live in a completely different world. I was remembering today one of my seminary roommates, he's the only student I knew that had a computer. I didn't know what to do with that. It's like there's this big box that weighed about a ton, and he actually wrote his papers on that. All the rest of us either learned how to type on those old-fashioned typewriters, or we had somebody else do, the typing for us. Luckily, my grandmother taught me how to type when I was really young, so I saved money doing my own typing. But he had a computer, and it was connected to this other box, which he called a dot matrix printer, that just seemed to print super fast, about like this, one line at a time, and it made a lot of noise. But anyway, I was just thinking, man, today, every seminary student has a computer. Most of them have laptops that they carry around with them, and that's how they do their research and their paper writing and just about everything else that they do. That's how they communicate with professors. But really, in so many other ways, our world has changed and will continue to change. One of the things that I think it was our president of the school said this last time is in the next, I'm trying to remember how many years, I know, the children that are beginning school today, by the time they finish college, something like 65% of them will be doing jobs that don't even exist today. Our world is changing fast. But there is one thing that I believe will never change. We need community. We need each other. We need to be able to come together and understand how we relate to God, the sacred, the divine. We need churches that have leaders that understand the importance of all of that. And so when I give to Pacific School of Religion, I decided when I went on the board that my giving to the church would be my primary giving, and my giving to Pacific School of Religion would be secondary. I am so grateful that I'm able to be here with you because of my seminary experience. I really want to make sure that in the future there are others who can say the same thing maybe 30 or 40 years from now. And so in a few moments, Larry's going to invite you to give to the offering. And as you do, I encourage you to consider giving a generous gift to Pacific School of Religion today on Seminary Sunday, on Pentecost Day, because the world needs a seminary like Pacific School of Religion. Hawaii needs a school like Pacific School of Religion. Thank you for your generosity and for your gifts. Amen.